Hi guys, DevilHunterXYZ, and it's been a while, but I decided to do another movie review, this time on Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, or I don't know if they would call it Episode 8, but either way, the 8th Star Wars movie. Yeah, so I just recently seen it with one of my friends, and overall, kind of compared it to the last movie, Force Awakens. I would say at first, initially, it still had some good hype, but not as high of a hype as the last movie. But I mean, overall, I still think it was a pretty decent movie itself. So let's take a look at this. Well, for the summary of the movie, a lot happens in it in about a 2.5 time period with this movie. I guess trying to condense it down though, the movie starts out with the Resistance fighting off against the First Order and a fleet of ships, and of course they had to go through a deadly counterattack led by Poe Dameron, which I mean it successfully worked, but it ended up losing a lot of their men, a lot of their fighters. And after a while, though, the Resistance decided to go into hyperspace to try to avoid the First Order, but somehow the First Order managed to track them down through hyperspace. And along with that, of course, you have Kylo Ren, who was kind of struggling internally to try to take down the ship because he knows his mother, Leia, Princess Leia, was still on board that ship, and of course he's still dealing with some internal turmoil with it. But in the end of it all, I mean, the command ship gets destroyed, but luckily Leia does manage to survive. But unfortunately, she's left unconscious, and then command is put up by Admiral Holdo, I think that's her name was. And in the meantime, BB-8, Finn, and then a lone mechanic, her name is Rose Tycho, I believe. They kind of went on a secret quest to try to take down the tracking device that the First Order has, so that way they can jump into hyperspace without them being tracked. Well, afterwards, the movie transitions to the planet, or I guess to the oceanic island of Octo, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, Rey meets up with Luke Skywalker, and of course she's trying to urge him to join the Resistance to fight against the First Order, but of course Luke refuses. And it kind of becomes like a huge back and forth struggle to try to better understand each other. And along the time, Rey and Kylo Ren starts communicating with each other. They somehow keep communicate with each other telepathically, and Kylo's trying to force Rey over to like the dark side, whatever. And well, after a while, though, we do find out about the story of how Luke was sensing the evil within Kylo Ren, or I guess at the time he was just Ben Solo. He sensed the evil. He sensed that the Supreme Emperor Snoke was influencing him, and at the time he was about to take Ben's life, but he hesitated on it, and of course it became a big misunderstanding, thinking that Luke was trying to assassinate Ben, but it becomes like a whole another story on its own. So anyway, afterwards though, Luke does manage to teach Rey the ways of the Force and kind of understand what being a Jedi really means. And of course, after a while, Rey still trying to convince Luke to join. Of course, Luke still refuses, but Rey still believes there was a way to save Kylo Ren because he was able to save. Because Luke was able to save Vader back in the past, so she believes that the same thing could be done with Kylo Ren. So she bores off, and at the same time, Luke surprisingly meets up with the spirit of Yoda, who yes, Yoda kind of tells Luke that he needs to learn from his failures. He can't keep dwelling on the past. Like what's done is done, but he needs to kind of forget what has happened and continue with the future. Well, meanwhile, BB-8, Finn, and Rose end up going to a place called Canto Bight to find a known hacker to help him break into the First Order's command ship to try to disable the tracking device. And of course, after a big whole ordeal of being thrown in prison and then having to run away from the security. They managed to find a hacker known as DJ, and they managed to get into the command ship of the First Order's command ship. And while they were almost successful of disabling the tracking device, but unfortunately they were captured. And it turns out that the hacker was working alongside with the First Order, or more or less just doing it just for the pay, nothing else really. Then also while on the ship, then you have Rey and Kylo Ren meeting up on the command ship, and of course Kylo took Rey to meet the leader Snoke, and of course Snoke was trying to get information out of Rey to find out where Luke Skywalker is, but of course Rey wouldn't budge, and of course Snoke ordered Kylo Ren to execute Rey, but surprisingly Kylo actually killed off Snoke instead, and with that both Kylo and Rey decided to somewhat work together to take down the rest of the guards that were surrounding the place. But after the whole skirmish, though, Kylo still is trying to get Rey to join in on his side to rule the galaxy together, as they both kind of share the same pain, the same emotions. But of course, Rey refuses and ends up leaving the place after a big explosion of trying to use the Force to grasp onto the lightsaber that belonged to Anakin Skywalker. Well, after the attempt to disable the tracking device fails, the Admiral at the time, Admiral Holdo, decides to evacuate the rest of the rebellion, the resistance group, to a known by planet for an old rebellion alliance facility, and of course it was kind of intercepted, unfortunately, by the fact that DJ revealed the plans of the Resistance to the First Order. So unfortunately, the First Order was taking down most of the transport ships. But in the end, though, Admiral Holdo decides to sacrifice herself by ramming the Resistance ship into the command ship of the First Order, which successfully that did work. But I mean, it was just a great loss out of all that. And then, of course, on the planet, though, I think it was called Crate, where the Rebellion Alliance was now on, they're basically trying to hold themselves while the First Order is on the planet trying to get into the fortified base. And along the time, Rey does manage to get into the action to try to help him out. Of course, though, it becomes a huge, giant battle in the end of it all, and then, of course, Finn tries to do a suicide run to try to stop a giant cannon to break open the protective blast doors. But unfortunately, he's stopped by Rose, who pretty much tells him that he needs to live, he needs to survive this. Well, afterwards, after seemingly to lose all hope, even Leia was starting to doubt their success. Luke appears out of nowhere, confronts Leia, and then goes outside the base to meet up with Kylo Ren. And pretty much they exchange a dialogue, pretty much saying that the war is still continuing, and that he is not the last Jedi. Then, of course, they get into a small fight, and I guess during the whole course of the fight, the rest of the Resistance team that is in the base find a secret way outside the base to go, run off to protect themselves. But then afterwards, we find out that it was just a projection of Luke that was confronting Kylo at the time. So it was just a huge diversion than anything else. But I guess due to the use of the Force that took up a lot of energy out of Luke, I guess he presumably dies. But even though he is gone, though, Leia still after a while, though, Leia does confront Rey, as the whole team gets back together on the Millennium Falcon. They confront each other, saying that even though Luke is gone, they still have what they need to win this war. They still have the Force on their side. Well, for the I guess for pros of this movie, one thing I can say is obviously the action. Weirdly, there wasn't too much of saber combat in this one, but I mean, there was a lot of space fights, space battles out there. I mean with the we know with the war between the First Order and the Resistance. I mean, there was a lot of TIE fighting going on, which I mean, it was pretty impressive though. I mean, a lot of explosions, a lot of action out there. So I did like that. The second thing I like is strangely the environments. I don't know if I ever said that for any of the other ones, but you know the different worlds that we visit. I mean, you got the what was it called, the Octo place that Luke is on. You had some strange creatures living there. You know, almost like kind of a subtle world, a subtle area. You know, that's more peaceful. And then of course you have the place called Canto Bite, which in a way kind of more reminds me of like Vegas. I think that's where they're kind of more or less basing it off of. I mean, it was kind of like a high class casino based area. I mean, it was pretty impressive actually. And then of course, yeah, you got the traditional like ship stuff, you know, ship scenery, you know, being inside the First Order, and of course you got the Rebel base, you know, that's on the planet Crate, you know, with the whole salt mine. So that one was pretty impressive too. And I guess the third thing I did like, the third pro for this, I would have to say the whole message behind everything. To me, I guess the whole theme was kind of more about like self-reflection, and I guess that was kind of what I was going for. I mean, kind of Rey's inner turmoil as to not identifying with anyone. Like she felt alone. She had like no one to really help her. You know, she had no parents. She was kind of confused. Same thing with Kylo Ren. He's kind of dealing with internal struggles with himself as to he's trying to be part of the dark side, but there's a part of light within him that he's still fighting against. And then of course you have Luke, who has pretty much self doubt and pretty much self doubt and failures that he's dealing with, and he just can't seem to break through that. That he believes that like everything was his fault. And then of course you even have Yoda, who's actually out there trying to convince Luke of moving on past history. You know, you had to continue on with the future, continue being a Jedi. Well, for cons, well, I guess for one thing, I said in the pros, but yeah, there's not too much lightsaber combat. It's kind of a little bit sad considering this is supposed to be Star Wars. You know, I was kind of expecting a lot more, you know, saber duels or anything like that. But maybe not something that's like over the top as like the prequel trilogy, but maybe something kind of more close to like maybe I don't know. I guess maybe The Empire Strikes Back, which a lot of people like to compare this movie to. It's kind of similarities with it. I mean, I would have liked to have seen maybe like an actual clash between Rey and Kylo Ren again. I mean, who knows? That would have been something more spectacular. Second, I would have to probably say the somewhat forced in comedic moments. Again, it's what's somewhat taking me away from it. I mean, I know this is bought up by Disney and they're trying to add a little bit of family humor into it, but it just doesn't quite fit well in terms of Star Wars. I mean, it kind of gets a little bit cringeworthy at times. You know, I'm like, I don't know, for instance, where you have Chewie trying to, I don't eat one of the species, you know, I don't know what it is, but you know, he's trying to eat on a campfire, and then of course have those creatures staring at him, and it just kind of becomes like an awkward, kind of funny moment. I don't know, it just kind of seems weird. And then third, I would have to say the movie, I guess more or less the plot kind of seems to drag on for quite a bit of time. Like when Rey meets up with Luke, I mean it drags out quite a while trying to, you know, having Rey trying to convince Luke to join the Resistance. But I mean, it probably could have been like a faster way of kind of progressing through the story instead of having to draw it out as long as possible. You know, instead of having to, you know, go into like a whole daily routine of what Luke does. I mean, I don't think it was really necessary to really show us any of that. Well, overall, I say Star Wars: The Last Jedi is I say it's still a pretty good movie. It doesn't have the same hype as The Force Awakens, in my opinion, and of course, I guess people like to compare this movie to maybe The Empire Strikes Back, which I mean, it does in a way have some similarities. You know, having, you know, the First Order uh, going up against the Resistance, and of course, it seemed like the First Order was winning the war. but at the same time, it also kind of symbolized a little bit of hope when it came to Rey and Luke, and kind of bringing back the whole Force and the Jedi, and of course the idea of being a Jedi. Yeah, it symbolizes like a new light that's shining through the darkness, trying to fight through the whole war. And really, it seemed like the whole war is kind of the more focused main thing of this movie itself. So maybe that was the reason why there wasn't too much lightsaber combat or anything like that. It was just more or less showcasing how the war has progressed over time. But I mean, really, besides that, though, I still think it was a pretty good movie. If you're really into like sci-fi action, I mean, this still has pretty good sci-fi action into it. Story-wise, though, I mean, yeah, it's about similar to Empire Strikes Back in some ways, but it's still a little bit original on its own. And again, it was still pretty good to see some of the old classic characters. Having Mark Hamill, and then of course you have Carrie Fisher in her last performance, and still pretty. It was a pretty good performance. I do like that final tribute that she did with the films, and it was still pretty nice. In fact, I would even dedicated the movie to her in memory of her, and so I mean I'm kind of glad they did that. But I mean anyway though, I think with this movie though, to give it a final score, I would say I would give it a 8 out of 10. It's still pretty high up, and I still do recommend it. I mean, just keep in mind that it's not as highly. It's not overhyped. It's not highly action packed. Not over the top action like the prequel series. But it's about more kind of down to earth in a way, and it's kind of hard to explain it. But it's just kind of more leveled out, kind of more showcasing how the war has affected everyone. Alright, guys. I think that's all I can really say. Go out and watch it. And be pretty surprised by it. Well, this is DevilHunterXYZ, and until next time.